For 74 years, she carried a dream in her heart, one that had always seemed just out of reach. But when she finally stepped onto that train, something happened that she never expected. It made her feel alive again. Margaret Dawson had always believed in simple dreams. She never asked for much, just moments of peace, small joys, and memories to hold on to. But there was one dream that had followed her since childhood, one she had never spoken of too often, because it felt too far away, too delicate to share. She wanted to ride a train. Not just any train, but a long, winding journey through the mountains, across rivers, past deserts and forests, watching the world pass by from the wide windows of a rail car. As a girl, she would press her nose to the pages of her father's magazines, staring at the pictures of majestic trains crossing the Rockies, slicing through snowy passes, gliding over bridges high above canyons. She could almost hear the sound of the wheels on the tracks, the whistle blowing into the open sky. But life was not a storybook, and dreams like that had a way of slipping through the cracks of time. Now, at 74, Margaret sat by her window in a quiet house, alone with her thoughts and memories. Her husband, Robert, had passed 5 years ago, and though her children visited when they could, the days were long, filled with silence and routine. She had spent a lifetime caring for others, raising kids, helping neighbors, tending to Robert through sickness and health. But in all those years, she had never stepped onto a train. And yet, the dream never left her. Sometimes, late at night, she would imagine it, the gentle sway of the carriage, the rhythmic sound of steel meeting steel, the changing landscapes unfolding like a movie outside her window. It wasn't just about seeing new places, it was about feeling something again, about remembering the girl who once believed that anything was possible. She had come close to forgetting that girl. But one day, something changed. One small moment that made her wonder, what if it's not too late? What if that dream, after all this time, is still waiting for me? Margaret didn't know it then, but the California Zephyr, the train she had read about so many years ago, was about to take her on a journey that would bring her back to life. And the way it happened was something she never could have planned. Margaret's life had always been about others. She was born in a small town in Iowa, where everyone knew everyone, and where dreams were often set aside for the sake of duty. Her father worked long hours at the local mill, and her mother kept the home warm and welcoming. Margaret was the eldest of 4 children, and from an early age, she learned what it meant to take care of those around her. When she was a teenager, she would watch the freight trains pass on the edge of town, long lines of steel and steam cutting through the quiet countryside. She wondered where they were going, what people were seeing through those windows, what stories were unfolding just beyond her reach. But there was never time to wonder for too long. There were chores to do, siblings to watch, and a future that seemed already written. She married Robert when she was 22, a kind man with steady hands and a calm voice. They built a life together, modest, but full of love. Robert worked as a mechanic, and Margaret found joy in keeping their home filled with warmth, raising 2 children, and being part of a close-knit community. Vacations were rare, often just day trips to nearby parks or visiting family. The idea of taking a long train ride across states, just for herself, seemed almost selfish. There was always something more important. Years passed, and the dream became quieter, tucked away beneath layers of responsibility. She watched her children grow, leave for college, start families of their own. She stood by Robert's side through his illness, through the long nights and uncertain mornings, never once thinking about the train. But now, with the house silent, the days blending together, the dream had begun to whisper again. Margaret would sit by the window, watching the sun rise and set, thinking about the time she had left. Was it too late to do something just for herself? Was it foolish to still believe in childhood dreams at 74? She wasn't sure. One afternoon, while dusting the shelves in her living room, she found an old book, one she hadn't opened in years. Inside was a folded page from a magazine, yellowed with age. It was an article about the California Zephyr, one of the most scenic train routes in America. She had saved it decades ago, telling herself she'd look into it one day. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the page, eyes scanning the words, the pictures. The train, the mountains, the rivers, they were still there, still waiting. If you're still here, feel free to subscribe, because Margaret's journey and the moment that brought her back to life is only just beginning. She sat down, the article in her lap, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something stir inside her. Hope. The magazine page sat on the coffee table for days. Margaret would glance at it every time she passed by, sometimes picking it up, running her fingers over the faded print, then placing it back down again. It was strange, the power that small piece of paper held, a silent reminder of something she had almost forgotten how to want. But with every passing day, the question grew louder in her mind. Why not now? Still, doubt crept in. She wasn't young anymore. She hadn't traveled far in years. Could she really go alone? Would she be able to manage everything, the tickets, the stations, the unfamiliar places? What if something went wrong? And then there was the fear she didn't like to admit. What if it didn't feel the way she always imagined? She mentioned it casually to her daughter during one of their phone calls. I found that old article, she said, trying to sound nonchalant. The one about the California Zephyr. I always thought it would be nice to take a trip like that. There was a pause on the other end. Then, her daughter replied, Mom, you should do it. Margaret was surprised. Do what? Take the trip. You've talked about that train for as long as I can remember. Why not go? You've earned it. It wasn't the answer she expected, but it was the one she needed. That night, Margaret sat at the kitchen table with her old notebook, the one where she used to write recipes and to-do lists. She flipped to a clean page and wrote at the top, train trip. Below it, she started jotting down what she needed to figure out dates, tickets, what to pack. It felt strange, like planning something for someone else, but with every word, every line, the dream started to feel a little more real. She went online, slowly, carefully, and found the official website for the California Zephyr. The photos were even more breathtaking now. Snow-capped mountains, winding rivers, golden plains. Her heart beat faster as she clicked through the options, her finger hovering over the Book Now button. But still, she hesitated. Could she really do this? Alone? The next morning, she woke with a sense of purpose. She called her daughter again. Would you help me? She asked. Just with the booking, I mean. I want to go. Her daughter's voice lit up. Of course, Mom. Let's do it together. They spent the afternoon on the phone, checking schedules, choosing seats. Margaret decided on a window seat. Of course, she wanted to see everything. When the confirmation email arrived, she stared at it for a long time. It was done. Her ticket was booked. But what she didn't know was how much this journey would change the way she felt about herself and her life. The day of the trip arrived quicker than Margaret expected. The night before, she barely slept, her mind filled with excitement and a flicker of nervousness. She had packed and repacked her small suitcase 3 times, making sure she hadn't forgotten anything, her warm sweater, her favorite book, a small notebook to write in, and of course, the old magazine page, now folded neatly inside. Her daughter insisted on driving her to the station. As they pulled into the parking lot, Margaret's heart began to race. She could see the platform ahead, bustling with people, some talking in excited tones, others waiting quietly, all heading somewhere. And then she saw it. The train. Long, silver, majestic. The California Zephyr stretched along the tracks, its polished cars gleaming in the morning sun. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. It was real. It was right there. Her daughter parked and helped her with the suitcase. You okay, Mom? She asked, sensing the weight of the moment. Margaret nodded. I still fixed on the train. I'm more than okay. They walked together toward the platform, the sound of wheels rolling on concrete, announcements echoing overhead, the occasional burst of laughter from families saying goodbye. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of coffee and diesel. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her ticket, but her steps were steady. As they reached the boarding area, a kind attendant greeted them, checked her ticket, and offered a warm smile. First time? He asked. Margaret smiled, her eyes misty. Yes. First time. The attendant nodded. You're going to love it. There's nothing like seeing the world from a train. Her daughter hugged her tightly, whispering, Call me when you can. Enjoy every minute. I will, Margaret promised, her voice full of emotion. She stepped onto the train slowly, carefully, her hand gripping the rail. The interior was cozy, with rows of seats, large windows on either side, and soft lighting that gave the space a peaceful glow. She found her seat, the window seat, and sat down, placing her bag beside her. Outside, the platform began to clear as passengers settled in. Margaret leaned back, looking out at the station, the people, the city she knew so well. But now, she was leaving it behind, even if just for a little while. A soft chime rang out, followed by the conductor's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the California Zephyr. Please find your seats and prepare for departure. We're about to begin our journey west." Margaret's heart swelled. She pressed her hand gently against the window, feeling the cool glass beneath her fingertips. The train lurched softly, then began to move. And as the platform slipped away, Margaret knew this wasn't just a trip. This was her moment. But what she would see through those windows would be more beautiful than she ever imagined. The train moved steadily, the gentle rhythm of the wheels creating a soothing hum that filled the carriage. Margaret sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the window, watching as the familiar city slowly gave way to open spaces. Buildings became fewer, trees more frequent, and soon the countryside stretched out before her like a vast canvas of colors and shapes. She pressed her hand lightly against the glass, feeling the vibration beneath her fingers, a physical reminder that this was real, not a dream, not something she'd simply wished for all these years, but something she was now living. The sun was rising higher, casting a golden light across the fields, illuminating the gentle hills and small towns they passed. Margaret could see people in their gardens, cars moving along roads that wound through the land, children playing near fences. Everything seemed to move slower from the train, as if the world was inviting her to take her time, to see it all without hurry. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the train fill her. There was something comforting in it, something steady and constant. It reminded her of when she was a child, lying in bed, listening to the rain tapping against the roof, a sound that made her feel safe, as if the world outside couldn't touch her. When she opened her eyes again, the scenery had changed. Now they were moving alongside a river, the water sparkling in the sunlight, winding its way through the trees. Birds flew overhead, their wings catching the light as they dipped and soared. Margaret reached into her bag and pulled out her notebook. She hadn't written anything in years, but now the words came easily. "This train is carrying more than just passengers," she wrote. "It's carrying pieces of me, the child who dreamed, the woman who waited, and now the soul that is waking up again." She looked around at the other passengers. Some were reading, others chatting softly, a few simply staring out the window like her. There was a quiet understanding among them, as if they all knew that this journey was something special, something worth savoring. A young woman in the seat across the aisle smiled at her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Margaret nodded. "More than I ever imagined." The train curved gently, and suddenly the mountains appeared in the distance, tall and majestic, their peaks dusted with snow. Margaret's breath caught. She had seen mountains in pictures, in films, but never like this, never rising before her, alive and real. As they drew closer, the train began to climb, the tracks hugging the hillsides, offering views that seemed to stretch on forever. The trees grew denser, the air clearer, and Margaret felt something inside her shift, a sense of freedom, of being untethered from the past. She took a deep breath, letting it fill her completely. "This is why I came," she thought. "To feel this. To remember that I'm still here." And as the train carried her higher into the mountains, Margaret knew that this was just the beginning of what the journey would give her. The train wound deeper into the mountains, each turn revealing views more breathtaking than the last. Margaret could hardly believe how the world seemed to unfold before her eyes, towering pines, sheer cliffs, rivers rushing far below. The windows framed it all like moving paintings, alive with light and motion. She felt as though time had slowed down, each moment stretching gently, giving her the space to breathe, to feel. After a while, she stood and walked carefully toward the observation car, a space designed entirely for watching the landscape in comfort. The ceiling arched high with glass panels, allowing views in every direction. The room was filled with a soft murmur of voices, but it felt peaceful, not crowded. She found an empty seat near the window and settled in. Around her, people of all ages sat in quiet awe, pointing, taking pictures, sharing stories in hushed tones. Margaret smiled, feeling part of something bigger, a shared sense of wonder. Next to her sat an older man, perhaps a few years younger than herself, with kind eyes and a worn leather notebook on his lap. He glanced over and offered a gentle nod. "First time on the Zephyr?" he asked. Margaret nodded. "First time on any train, actually." The man smiled warmly. "You picked a good one." They fell into easy conversation. His name was Walter, a retired teacher from Denver, taking the train to visit his grandchildren in California. He had been on the Zephyr many times, but he never tired of it. "There's something about the rhythm of it," he said, tapping his fingers lightly on his notebook. "It reminds you to slow down, to pay attention." Margaret agreed. She shared a bit of her story, the dream she had carried, the years she waited, the courage it took to finally come. Walter listened closely, then said something that stayed with her. "Dreams don't age, Margaret. We do. But dreams, they stay the same, waiting for us to catch up." She looked out the window again, watching the trees blur past, her heart full. Later, as the sun began to dip behind the peaks, casting long shadows across the valleys, Margaret returned to her seat. The train continued west, the light outside growing softer, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. Dinner was served in the dining car, and Margaret joined a table with two women traveling together, sisters on a vacation they had planned for years. They laughed easily, shared stories of their youth, and included Margaret as if they had known her forever. The food was simple, but delicious: roasted chicken, warm bread, and a slice of apple pie that reminded her of home. As night fell, Margaret made her way back to the observation car one more time. The stars had come out, bright and countless against the dark sky. She sat quietly, staring out, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't just on a train. She was on a journey back to herself. And as the train rolled through the quiet of the night, she realized she wasn't afraid of the future anymore. The train moved quietly through the night, the steady hum of the wheels creating a gentle rhythm that echoed through the dimly lit carriage. Margaret sat alone in her seat, wrapped in a soft blanket provided by the attendant, gazing out into the darkness. The stars above were clear and bright, scattered across the sky like tiny lanterns guiding her through this unfamiliar yet comforting journey. She had never seen the world like this, so vast, so quiet, so alive. The other passengers had mostly settled in for the night, some dozing in their seats, others reading softly or whispering in low voices. Margaret didn't feel tired. Her mind was too full, her heart too open. She leaned her head against the cool glass, letting the vibrations soothe her, and thought about the road that brought her here. She remembered the little girl who used to dream by the window, listening to the whistle of distant trains, wondering where they might go. She thought about her father, who worked hard every day but still found time to share stories about places he'd never seen. She thought about Robert, his gentle smile, the way he held her hand during the quiet evenings, the promises they made to one day travel together. But life had other plans, and Robert's time had come too soon. Margaret closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memories wash over her, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Those moments, those people, had shaped her. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was living in the past. She was here, now, moving forward. She opened her notebook again, the same one where she had written during the first stretch of the journey. By the light of a small lamp above her seat, she began to write once more. "This train has carried me farther than I ever imagined. Not just through mountains and rivers, but through time, through the parts of me I had forgotten. I feel lighter. I feel awake." The words came easily, flowing like the landscape outside, steady and free. As the train curved gently along the tracks, Margaret stood and made her way once again to the observation car. It was nearly empty now, just a few souls watching the stars. She found a seat, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders, and stared out into the night. The train passed through small towns, their lights glowing softly in the distance like beacons in the dark. She wondered about the people there, about their dreams, about the lives unfolding in those tiny specks of light. The moon rose higher, casting a silvery glow over the land. Margaret felt a tear slip down her cheek, but it wasn't from sorrow. It was from a sense of something she hadn't felt in years: freedom. Freedom from the weight of waiting, from the fear of starting too late, from the belief that some dreams are meant to be forgotten. Here, on this train, in the middle of nowhere and everywhere, she had found herself again. A gentle voice broke her thoughts. It was the attendant, offering a warm cup of tea. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked kindly. Margaret smiled, taking the cup in her hands. "Didn't want to," she replied. They shared a quiet moment, and then he left her to the stars. As the train rolled on, carrying her deeper into the night, Margaret felt at peace. And for the first time in a long, long time, she didn't feel alone. Morning arrived gently, with soft rays of sunlight streaming through the train's wide windows. Margaret stirred from her light rest, blinking slowly as the world outside came into view again, no longer the dark silhouettes of night, but rolling hills bathed in gold, sleepy towns waking up with the first light of day, and rivers glistening like ribbons of silver. She sat up, stretching her arms carefully, and smiled to herself. It felt like waking from a dream, but one that had truly happened. She could still feel the rhythm of the train, the warmth of the tea from the night before, the peace that had wrapped around her like an old friend. As the train neared the final stretch of its journey, Margaret took one last walk to the observation car. The morning light poured in, casting everything in a glow that made it feel new, fresh, full of possibility. She stood for a while, hands resting on the rail, watching as the landscape rolled by. There was still beauty in the world, so much of it, and now she was ready to see more. Returning to her seat, she reached for her notebook once again. There was something she needed to write, something she didn't want to forget. "I am not just a woman who waited. I am a woman who finally went. And this ride has reminded me that every day is a chance to go further." The announcement came over the speakers, gentle but final. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will soon be arriving at our final destination. Please gather your belongings and prepare to disembark." Margaret packed her things slowly, not rushing, not wanting the moment to end too soon. She looked around the carriage, at the seats, the windows, the light, all of it now part of her story. When the train pulled into the station, she stood with the others, waiting her turn, feeling calm and full. As she stepped off onto the platform, the air felt different, not just because of the new place, but because she was different. Her daughter was waiting there, waving from the crowd, her face lighting up as soon as she saw her. "Mom, how was it?" she asked, hugging her tightly. Margaret pulled back, eyes shining. "It was everything I hoped for, and more. I feel like I've just started living again." They walked together, slowly, Margaret telling her about the mountains, the stars, the people she met. Every word was filled with wonder, every step lighter than the last. That evening, back at home, Margaret placed the old magazine page in a frame and set it on the mantel. It wasn't just a memory, it was a promise, a reminder of what she had done and of what still waited. She opened her notebook, turned to a fresh page, and wrote at the top, "Next journey. Before you go, tell me, what's a dream you've carried quietly, waiting for the right moment? Something you still hope to live, no matter your age? I'd love to hear about it in the comments." And if Margaret's story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even after all these years, life still holds beautiful surprises, give this video a like and join our community by subscribing. There are more stories like Margaret's, more dreams ready to be lived. Because here, we believe that it's never too late to dream.